And with that, I want to welcome you inside our Big Ten Network studios in this edition of Big Ten Today, presented by Gatorade. I'm your host, Rick Pizzo. It is a very special day because it is Veterans Day. So I want to start by thanking all the veterans out there for their service to our country as we welcome in a good friend, Yogi Roth. And Yogi, I start that way because I have a father-in-law who served 30 years in the Army and just recently got to spend time with over 100 vets at the Veteran Golfers Association National Championship here in suburban Chicago. I'm not going to get political here, but I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. This is the day that we honor the service and sacrifice of all those men and women.
Yeah, well said. It's been amazing and an honor to go to all these stadiums as they recognize and celebrate those that have served this country too the last couple weekends, pending how the schedule lies and when you have a home game. And just to see everybody come together, which we know sports can do that. I've been able to witness it at the 50 the last couple weeks, and it's been an absolute blast. So I echo your sentiments.
Sports and service truly come together each and every weekend. Well, this past weekend provided us more than one big story, but we had to choose one, and we choose Indiana's comeback win over Penn State. Hoosiers, final minute. Fernando Mendoza throws it up. Omar Cooper comes down with not just the catch of the year, maybe the catch of program history all time for Indiana as the Hoosiers remain unbeaten with that 27-24 win over Penn State. Fernando Mendoza, Yogi, already had something of a Heisman moment, if you will, earlier this year, leading Indiana back in Iowa City to knock off Iowa. Now he does it to give the Hoosiers their first ever win in State College. And not just a moment for Mendoza, but a moment for this program once again to remind us just how far they've come since Curt Cignetti's arrival before the beginning of the 24 season.
Yeah, you could use that word, right, Rick? Moment. I mean, it was a moment for Curt Cignetti. Think about what he said after the game. This is a guy who grew up going to the stadium in State College every other year, right? The son of a Hall of Fame coach, obviously grew up in Pennsylvania for a large part of his life. So knowing what that game meant to him personally, I love how he just kind of opened up and got a little vulnerable for the first time in a while for all of us to watch. You talk about that catch. Think of a better catch in your lifetime. I mean, when you think of all the stakes and what college football is, what Indiana was, who they are currently, and then just like the grass, like if the grass is another 2 centimeters taller, that's not a catch. I mean, there's so many little things that go into it. And to your point, the man making it all happen is Fernando Mendoza. We need to talk about him. I think he's had 3 huge moments. They've been tied or behind in the fourth quarter 3 times. You reference Iowa. How about in Eugene against the Oregon Ducks and then in State College? And he hasn't flinched. And I think when you look at this drive, and Coach Cignetti said it after the game, the final drive of the game, a 10-play drive, you're thinking, yeah, it might be over. Like, I get it, especially after this sack. 151 left in the ball game. What's going to happen? Well, what happened was they didn't flinch. They drive all the way down, almost another near turnover. The linebacker doesn't slip coming out of his break, and then the catch heard all around the country in all of college football. And I just think there's a tremendous resolve there for Fernando, for Omar, for Coach Sig, for this entire program. And there's so many little things that go into that moment. And we know Coach Cignetti well enough to know that he went through all of those with his team. He talked about it earlier this week in his media availability. He talked about the core work in the offseason of Omar Cooper. And he's right to make that catch to be that strong in the middle part of your body, to control your legs, both feet, your toes, while catching the ball, while looking down. I mean, it was miraculous. And you start to think like, wow, is this a dream season? And I go the other way. Last year was a dream season. This is Indiana's reality. They're a big-time team. They've got all the tools to not just win the Big Ten, but win the entire thing. And we know this. We've been around long enough, right? Like, you got to have games like this. There's going to be moments like this in a championship run. This was their 3rd of the season. And it was magnificent to watch because of the way that everything has played out for Penn State this year and what Indiana has done on the road.
I'm glad you brought up that factor, the tight games, the games in which you have to find a way. As impressive as the 63-10 throttling of Illinois was earlier this year, these are the kind of games that, to me, truly pay dividends when you get into the college football playoff because, save Georgia's national championship win over TCU by 1 million a couple of years ago, you're just not going to play games like that, Yogi, when you get into the playoff.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I think there's a mentality there. We've seen teams do this. And I think you hear it at times like, do you play tight when games are on the line. And the best teams don't, right? Whether it was Ohio State and their run last year. I know we'll talk about Oregon and their game at Iowa, and then this one. And I look at the final drive as another example of that. And you go to those 3 games where they've been tied or behind in the fourth quarter that we're referencing. Fernando Mendoza is averaging almost 17 yards per completion. That means I'm cutting it loose. Like, if you watch him play, he's not afraid. He's not hesitating, right? He's thrown it to Cooper. He's thrown it to Surratt against Iowa. Like, you're watching him anticipate windows, and I think that's a mentality. So I go to obviously the head coach, but then the assistants. Brian Haynes defensively, not getting enough credit for what they're doing on that side of the ball. Offensively, Mike Shanahan, the offensive coordinator. It's a mindset. Look at these wide receivers. Coach Shanahan coaches the wide receivers. He was an elite receiver in college at Pitt, and they play that way. They play with an edge. And I think last year when they got to big moments, right, when they went 10-0, and then they had to go play Ohio State, and then they played Notre Dame in the playoff, like, you could kind of feel, and even Coach Cignetti referenced it after the playoff game where they lost on the road of, we just weren't talented enough. Like, we done so much. Like, did we really believe we can go get this done? I just think that their knowing, and I believe there's a difference between hoping and knowing, is so real. It's so legit, and it's echoed by everyone. And most importantly, it's echoed in the play on the field, to your point.
And now they have depth, more depth than they had last year at key positions. Elijah Surratt, one of the best receivers, not just in the Big Ten, in the nation, wasn't on the field for that game-winning drive. He didn't step on the field at all against Penn State with injury. We saw the emergence of Charlie Becker, who Curt Cignetti said is going to be a bigger part of this offense. And now Surratt TBD for this weekend against Wisconsin. But then Indiana has a bye, so he'll be healthy for the Purdue game, and we assume perhaps the Big Ten championship game and the push into the playoff. Speaking of the playoff, if there was one knock on Oregon's resume, it was that the Ducks didn't have a signature win. Well, that knock is gone because Oregon goes to Iowa City, wins 18-16. Atticus Sappington, the game-winning 39-yard field goal after Dante Moore and Oregon have to fashion a game-winning drive of their own. But, Yogi, this was something of a different game-winning drive, at least stylistically, from the one that we saw against Indiana. Oregon is a different team stylistically than Indiana, and I think it played itself out in those final 2 minutes inside Kinnick Stadium.
Yeah, there's so much to break down in this game, but when you go to the final drive, what I love for Dan Lanning and Will Stein, and if you watch their doc series, Ducks versus Them, you can check it out online. They do a marvelous job at that. You can hear them on the headset, and there's a calmness. Dan Lanning talked about to his team all week, hey, you got to just be able to breathe. He talked about it on a big noon kickoff. You got to be able to breathe, take a breath in these big moments. They had their timeouts. They didn't use them on this final drive. In fact, they ran the football. They started with not a ton of time, 1:51 on the clock, and you're thinking, oh, do they have to throw? Do they have to go fast? They did anything but. It was methodical. It was surgical when you look at that throw right there. And then it was ice in the veins from Sappington to win the game. And when I looked at that drive, and you go back and you watch it, you do it every week in the studio, we do it up in the booth, it's situational football and it's clock management. I mean, it's become such a big part of the game, the analytics, the book that we hear about all the time. I think often you can be thinking when you're watching a game on the road, when you have timeouts, like, take a couple. Not this team. They trusted what they were doing all game, which was really playing well at the line of scrimmage. I mean, look at how much they ran the ball in terms of efficiency and success. I mean, it was impressive, 261 yards rushing, over 7 yards per carry. So they start the drive. Let's just keep doing that. Let's see if we can bust. We know the weather, the inclement weather. We trust our QB, but we also have major injuries in terms of playmakers not being in the game, right? Kenyon Sadiq doesn't roll in the game. Gary Bryant starts the first quarter, doesn't finish the game. DeCorian Moore doesn't play in the game, the freshman All-American, we would presume. So they lean on what worked, and then they go to the arm of Dante Moore when they need to. And how about him? He didn't play great in that Indiana game, got knocked out in the Wisconsin game, and then to come back, that throw on the road, the only spot he could put it, he does down the sideline. And I just thought the end of the game was marvelous, not leaving really any time on the clock for Iowa to make a comeback, managing the timeouts, only using it when they needed to late in that drive. And I think that's a part of the game that just needs to get a light shined on. And we talked about it with Indiana. They had no timeouts. They just had to go. Oregon, they had them all, but they trusted the scheme. And I think that's really impressive. And I think for Dan Lanning, that's something that should get noticed in terms of how he's managing late game situations. They're only going to see more of them as the season and their schedule progresses.
But don't you think, Yogi, that goes back to this team believing everything that Dan Lanning says, and not just the content of what he says, but how he says it and the messaging. You look at the setup. It was lousy weather conditions. You mentioned the players that were out for Oregon. Iowa has one of the best run defenses in the country. So what are you going to do? Well, you're going to try to go to the outside, right? No, Dan Lanning tells everybody, the media, he tells his team, we are who we are, and we are going to do what we do. And what we're going to do in this football game is run the football, and we're going to do it between the tackles, where nobody does that against Iowa, certainly not in Iowa City. But that's the kind of mentality that you have to have if you're going to win on the road. And Oregon has now won 11 straight. As great a home field advantage as Autzen is, Oregon has won 11 straight away from Eugene. No other FBS team in the country can claim that. That is something that goes back to believing that you can do what you do no matter where you are or who you're playing.
Yeah, he talked to his team. The message this week was the way of the warrior. And he said the warrior never hesitates.
Exactly.
And I felt like he like kind of speaks these things into fruition, right? Whether it's on the road in Ann Arbor last year, the game against Ohio State last year. Like you see the clips of him, obviously they go viral online. But to your point, there's a lot of substance there. And I think for outsiders, Oregon is known for flash and the swoosh and all of those elements. But you get behind the curtain like you have, and you see the DNA traits of connection, growth, toughness, and sacrifice that Dan Lanning has preached since he got the job. And they've only gotten stronger since he's been in Eugene, and his roots have gotten stronger. And I love that it's been put on display. You know, it's what he said after the game. I mean, this is a tough league. So he said prior to the game, which this league has a ton of variety, and it does. So you have to have variety. But their core is on the offense and defensive lines. And they didn't flinch in that regard. They've played their game. And I'm going to be really curious to see what the committee does. Like, do they vault them up 5 spots? Based on that win, to your point, the whole world was saying they're going to lose. Everybody thought, you know, that's where the dreams go to die. And they didn't. You know, they had a lead. They get down. They could have folded. I mean, it was very similar to Indiana on the road at Penn State. And they just stayed steady. They took a deep breath and away they went. And this is what championships do. Championship teams do. They have to be able to execute at a premium level. It's because they train at a premium level. And Oregon is a premium team. I mean, I know they have a loss, so it's not like that fun to have the conversation, should they be top 3 in the CFP. But they're a top 3 team to me in the country. Like, wouldn't it be shocked if they went out and went on a run that we saw from Ohio State if they could finish this thing? Not easy. Minnesota, we know they got to play SC, and then the rivalry on the road against Washington. But they'll be as weathered as anybody heading into the playoff if they could finish strong with these last 3 games.
Yes, I know they have a loss, too. That loss is against the number 2 team in the country, a team that is also unbeaten in Indiana, and just showed us that obviously they can win on the road as they did earlier this year. All right, much more on the CFP. Have yourself a Saturday right here on the Big Ten Network. Heisman contender Fernando Mendoza leads number 2 Indiana against Wisconsin. Then Iowa collides with USC in a showdown rife with CFP implications. Our coverage begins with countdown to kickoff. Jerry DiNardo joining me at 11:30 Eastern, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, only on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. We'll get to Iowa's showdown with USC coming up in just a bit. But, Yogi, let's first focus on USC's win this past weekend over Northwestern. Lincoln Riley and company have positioned themselves now in the month of November to make that run to get into the top 12 and be part of the college football playoff for the first time in a long time. Everybody's been waiting for this arrival of USC since Lincoln Riley arrived. What did you think about the way that they played all 3 phases in that win over Northwestern?
I think it was impressive. You know, you go back, and we all love doing this. You look at the schedule, and you're like, okay, they got Nebraska, then Northwestern on a Friday night, and then you move on, and you're like, oh, Iowa. And having called Northwestern a couple weeks ago, I'm saying to myself, look out. I mean, this team is physical. They schematically, defensively, they're going to make it really challenging for you to find explosive plays. To me, I kind of circled that. Like, this could be upset city on a Friday night in L.A. In L.A., it's hard to get to the Coliseum on a Friday night. The Trojan fans found a way to get there. Lincoln Riley referenced that in his postgame. And his team showed up. And his team showed up at the line of scrimmage, whether in the run game, which is very creative, but obviously they got 2 of the best playmakers in the country. In Mekhi Lemon has another career day, 3 games, over 150 yards now on the season as a receiver. And Jacoby Lane, how about that one-handed catch? I mean, it's covered as well as you can in the end zone. And that's what this team does. I think when I watch SC back, Rick, and I've watched this game a few times now in advance of this weekend, they come at you in waves, and that's the challenge. Like, whether it's Jaden Mayava pulling it and using his legs, whether it's the two receivers that I referenced, whether it's King Miller slashing through like he is right here, the defensive line. I mean, they can just find ways to create explosive plays. And when this offense finds a rhythm, look out. And then when it becomes a matchup game, it's over. I mean, I just think it's so hard to match up against these two monster wide receivers. And then they add a little trickeration at times. I mean, they ran multiple plays where your eyes are completely tested. I'd imagine they'll run a couple of those early in this game against Iowa, try to slow down the edges of that defense led by Max Llewellyn. So overall, huge for the Trojans. And they're playing meaningful games in November. For the first time, you could argue in a decade plus. I mean, it's a big deal here in LA. Lincoln Riley's talked about making the Collie the mecca of college football like it once was when I was there back in the day. They got a shot this weekend, man. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, the two criticisms that we've heard recent years about USC, Lincoln Riley sometimes tries to be too smart, only wants to throw the ball. He's setting up those passes to those receivers by adding that run game, especially with Jaden Mayava, that's keeping defenses on their heels. So I absolutely love that. And the toughness had been questioned. They are so much tougher up front. And Jaden Mayava with one of the toughest plays of the season after throwing a pick to get the big defensive lineman to the ground, forces the fumble outside of the end zone. Touchback completely changed that game in the second half. And so now you face Iowa, a team that you know is going to be angry, upset, always tough. You do have the advantage of it being at home, and maybe you hope the Hawkeyes have a little bit of that tough loss hangover. But still, this is one of those games, Yogi, where you just laid it out. You cannot look ahead to Oregon. You cannot worry about the final game of the regular season against your crosstown rivals because everything is on the line this weekend against the Hawkeyes.
Yeah, I think you just did the open for our game on Saturday, man.
Done.
That's exactly what it's going to be. I mean, Lincoln Riley's talked about it since he got there. I was at the opening presser, and he literally stood up there and said, we want to make this the mecca of college football. Well, it was hard his first couple of years. Year one, they go on a run with Caleb, but after that, it hasn't been anywhere near the expectation. Well, I always felt like they had to hit the reset, and they did last year. And I called it a foundational year. They had all those close losses, but the foundation was set. Then they made the move to Jaden Mayava in the back half of the season. The foundation was set. Then they added some defensive linemen, and now the foundation was stronger than it was a year ago. These offensive linemen, these third-year players are a year older, and you're watching them run the football. And that's going to be the challenge in this game. When the offensive line goes left, and Jaden Mayava can keep it and go right. I mean, this is a big part of their game, pulling offensive linemen. It will stress the eyes of this Iowa defense. Now, they're going to have to try to get knocked back, and they're going to have to win on the perimeter, something they've shown they're capable of doing. You go back to the Rutgers game. First half of the Rutgers game, we're talking, many moons ago, it seems like, they struggled in the pass game. Since then, this defense has tightened up. Outside of a slant for a touchdown against Indiana to Elijah Surratt for about 49 yards, they've been pretty much ice in the back end. So can they do that again? I also think they'll learn from their trip to L.A. last year. Remember the game against UCLA at the Rose Bowl? It was a late game. It was kind of a wonky game. I think this defense reminds themselves about that, and they know the test they have in front of them. So this will be awesome because they will be won and lost at the line of scrimmage, but it'll also be about the explosive plays because SC, it'll be at times a stalemate at the line of scrimmage. But if they can create a couple explosive plays, that's how they can jump on people. And if they can jump on Iowa, Mark Gronowski in this offense, it hasn't proven to be built to be able to win in the throw game and make big comebacks down 2 scores. So field position, special teams will be huge. If Iowa has shots down the field like we just saw there, they have to complete those. They'll have a couple. In every one of these big games, there's always 2 or 3 that are available. Both teams are going to have to deliver and execute in what will be an incredible environment. I expect the Collie to be sold out, and everybody in LA knows what this is. This is kind of like, can you hang in the Big Ten type of test in the game? And that was the big narrative when the Big Ten expanded. I've heard it for years now here out west. Can Oregon, can Washington, can the 2 LA schools handle the physicality? I think they have met that moment numerous times. SC's got to meet it this time. If they want to go to the playoff and keep this dream alive and keep this season alive, they got to meet it in a big way with a team that I think will flush the loss to Oregon. I do not expect any sort of hangover from Kirk Ferentz's squad.
Yeah, Oregon has certainly checked that box about physicality. Now, can USC do the same? Question will likely be answered 3:30 Eastern, 12:30 local time out in LA right here on the Big Ten Network. Team in the country and arguably the top receiver that we've seen in multiple years in the nation, one of the best in Ohio State history. It has taken Jeremiah Smith a grand total of 25 games to get to 25 receiving touchdowns. Look at the names behind him. It took David Boston 6 additional games, Marvin Harrison 9. He is there 10 games quicker than Chris Carter. He had a fairly decent college and NFL career. There is no doubt that Jeremiah Smith is ready to go to the NFL. Of course, he can't do so until after next year, which makes Ryan Day fairly happy. Ryan Day should be all smiles right now. You're the defending national champion. All the pressure is on you. You've checked every box. Yogi, you've stayed fairly healthy. You've been really efficient, playing fewer plays per game, but putting up these huge numbers. I'm just not sure that right now there are any true weaknesses when you look at this Ohio State football team.
Yeah, the only thing we don't know is what happens really when they get punched in the mouth. You know, we saw the opening game. I think it's hard to kind of figure out what that was going to be. And I don't have any concerns about how they'll respond. But we just haven't necessarily seen that yet in a game. We know we'll see that in the season finale. But what I love about this team, and let's just start with Jeremiah Smith, he's not only the top receiver in America, he might be the best player in America. They have a 2nd and 20 in this game. And he's the only guy that makes plays on 2nd and 20 for a first down. I mean, the way he can explode in and out of routes. Right here, this is the example I'm talking about. He catches it, and boom, that right foot in the ground gets north and south as well as anybody. He reminds me of the guy I played with in Larry Fitzgerald, a guy that just kept scoring touchdowns. People kept double covering him. He kept showcasing and highlighting and illuminating his teammates, never making about himself. I mean, it's so impressive to watch him work. And then just to the graphic that you showed, I don't know those other receiving corps had the elite playmakers that Jeremiah Smith has had around him. So for him to do it, not necessarily being the only guy, is even more impressive. Well, it was last year with Emeka Ibuka, this year with Carnell Tate when he's healthy. I mean, overall, it's been phenomenal to watch. When you pivot to this team, I just think that after every game, Ryan Day's been able to pull a lesson to teach his team, to get them ready for the games that continue to grow, get bigger, and the spotlight continues to grow with the playoff and of course, the looming game against Michigan in a couple weeks. And I love that, right? You have an interception, Julian saying, in the end zone, you can't have it. Right? Lesson learned. You see the run game, finding real efficiency. It's like every week they come in with a different focus, and I can only imagine how hard that is to plan against as a defensive coordinator, because one game they're going to open up and throw it. Next game, it's efficiency in the run game. The next game, maybe it'll be QB run. I mean, who knows what we'll see as this thing shakes out with one of the top defenses in America.
I do want to ask, why can't Jeremiah Smith be in the NFL next year? We're letting the players do all this different stuff, not trying to get on my box, but like this guy could clearly be playing in the NFL. He should be playing in the NFL next season. All right, so we know Ohio State's going to be #1 when the committee releases its second rankings of the year later on tonight. I think there's a couple questions, Yogi, that I'm going to be interested in watching be answered. Number one, does Indiana get leapfrogged by Texas A&M because of a tight game and A&M remains unbeaten? And as for the rest of the Big Ten, how far does Iowa fall after a third loss that is by a combined 10 points now? And how high do USC and Michigan, the Wolverines were on bye, how high do those teams rise this week as they get closer and closer to that all-important top 12?
Yeah, and I'd add in there, how high does Oregon rise? You know, based on what they did in that win, you know, remember the new metric this year around, you know, how strong your record is, how strong you are at the given moment. So I think that to me is going to be a data point that we learn from tonight. I also am curious about what they do with Indiana. I've always asked members of the committee this, or the chairs of the committee when we've been around them, do you evaluate the body of work? Do you evaluate how they are right now? And you get split answers. Like there's not a definitive way to operate once you walk into that room and take your hat off. I mean, it's human nature in that game. So when you look at this Indiana game, you could say, well, nobody's going to argue the talent on the Penn State team. There's not an NFL scout that's going to argue the talent on the defensive front. And we saw it on full display in this game many times. So do they say, wow, Penn State was going to get somebody. They finally rose up and played well. Their backup quarterback, Ethan Grunkemeyer, had his best game as a starter for this program. And it's a heck of a place to go get a win. Nobody's going to argue that. So I'd be curious that data point. And then to your point of A&M's win, you know, with a team that clearly has had success and is ranked. So that to me is something to note. And I think the other one that I'll go to is head-to-heads. Like, where are they evaluating some of these teams that have played each other this season? SC and Michigan is a great one to look at, because I think as we play this thing out, let's just say SC wins out. Let's say Michigan shocks the world and they win out. Then you have this Notre Dame Michigan, USC potential conversation with 2 losses. So I think right now, like, we don't know how the committee is in terms of consistency because they've only had 1 ranking. Tonight, that will be all of the conversation. Once this thing shakes out, what are the changes from a week ago? And I think we're just going to start to piece together to project where teams might go. But I think all your data points are valid, and I think where the Ducks go, because I thought they were ranked too low with how they played and what they just did. So we'll see how they value the league. We'll see how they value Iowa.
So you're telling me that a large group of people known as a committee in the same chamber debating the same issue don't always think the same way about trying to resolve those issues? I have no idea to what you could be referring. College Football Playoff Committee not meeting in Washington, D.C., by the way. Still to come. Oh, that tricky Wisconsin football social media account. You see the W as the Badgers claim to be the real UW after the upset win over Washington this past weekend. Boy, Yogi, AD Chris McIntosh looks like a pretty smart guy after that win. Came out, gave support for Luke Fickell, and then said he will return as head coach in 2026. Fickell said during his press conference on Monday, sure, we all needed a boost, anything to make us feel like we're moving forward toward the right goal. And we saw that forward movement play itself out on Saturday.
We sure did. And it was a pleasure to be there. Number one, first game I've had in a long time with snow, like dating back to probably my playing days. So that was
Says the West
fun.
Coast-based guy.
Yeah, that's right. The environment was incredible. It really was. But leading up to the game, I think it's important to note, you referenced the athletic director, Chris McIntosh. He spent time with our crew in advance of the game, and he was incredibly gracious with his time just to talk about the landscape of the football program, where things sit now. And I said it at the start of the show, and I'll say it again. Number one, they said it to quiet the noise, right? And I think that was important to do and the right move to do. I think it's also a reminder of the facts. Name a team in the country that can be to their second, their third, their fourth quarterback every year as the head coach and have tremendous success. It's impossible in the era that we sit now. I mean, you look at Luke Fickell's record. He's 8-3 when the starting quarterback in the NIL era is starting for him at Wisconsin. They had their 4th quarterback of the season play the majority of this game where they beat a top 25 team in Washington. So those are the facts. And then I go to the truth of the matter, at least from my eye to this show, which is this team plays so hard. They're so connected. You saw the celebration on the sideline post-game, but you've seen it in losses as well. You've seen this team connected. You see them standing and jumping and hollering, but most importantly, flying to the football, not having lows. You're watching Christian Alego break his arm against Ohio State and play the remainder of the game. You saw a team not quit. And I think for athletic director Chris McIntosh, he was aware of that. He's also aware, more than all of us, of the standard within the program. I mean, he lived it. So for him to say that, based on his evaluation, A, I applaud it in the landscape we're in now. B, I think it's accurate tremendously. And then for it to play out the way that it did Saturday night was really impressive. Was really impressive for that team to keep fighting when they easily could have laid down. And that, to me, always goes back to coaching. I think every team reflects the attitude and identity of the head coach and the mentality of it. And for Luke Fickell, he's a competitor. I mean, he's as nice as a guy as you'll find, but boy, is he a competitor. When you watch him at practice, when you talk to players, when you ask, hey, what is it like in intimate moments, they go to that. And you saw this team do that and get a win. I think we've seen them do that all season long. And then you look at some of the players, man. I mean, come on. When you look at some of these young linebackers, Mason Posa, Cooper Catalano, 30 combined tackles. I mean, they put on a show in the snow on Saturday night. It was really impressive to watch, but not surprised with how this team is continuing to compete. And they got one, which, as Luke Fickell told us on air afterwards, man, he needed that exhale, much like they needed that change of possession there. Nice little pick there from Rico Hallman. So overall, a really big-time performance against the top 25 team at home.
I'll add this to your comments about Chris McIntosh. He didn't just pledge his support for Luke Fickell. He also said, we have to do more. The university has to do more. The football program has to do more to support Fickell, talking about NIL and what they would do to get players in and changing facilities and things like that. That is all part of this story. And to your point about Luke Fickell being remarkably competitive, James Laurinaitis, former Big Ten Network analyst, one of the great Ohio State linebackers of all time. When he played at OSU and Fickell was the DC, he said they would have racquetball games to the death. And Fick got so competitive that from time to time, Yogi, there was always a call that was, shall we say, debatable. I asked Luke about that. He said, Those guys are just sad that they kept losing, spoken truly like an ultra-competitive kind of guy. Coming up on Saturday, Big Ten tailgate and countdown to kickoff will get you ready for a spectacular day of Big Ten football. Our games include second-ranked Indiana at home against the aforementioned Badgers and that all-important Iowa-USC clash inside the Coliseum. It all starts at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific, only on the Big Ten Network in the Fox Sports app. Yogi, let's spend a few more moments talking about other games on the weekend schedule. Maryland, Illinois, two teams probably feeling different about themselves heading into this weekend's matchup.
Yeah, well, I'll say, go back and you watch all the games from this past weekend. You could argue Maryland and Rutgers was as entertaining as any of them. Back and forth, big run on the opening drive from Malik Washington, another run later in the game from him. Rutgers making plays before the half. I mean, it was fun to watch, and both of those teams desperately needed that win. We're talking about postseason eligibility. So I'll say this for Maryland. I can't wait to watch them come out in this game. A young team, can you flip the switch, flush the last game, and try to go get a win on the road? And then when I look at Malik Washington, how does Illinois defend him now? This is not a part of his game that many teams were preparing for when you're meeting with staff saying, how are you going to slow down Malik Washington? They're not talking about this part of his game. So now you add another part in terms of defending the run game, and look out. And we're watching a young freshman continue to develop at the quarterback position. So that will be a huge test for an Illinois defense. Remember the last time they played a dynamic quarterback was DeMond Williams and really struggled in that regard. So coming off a bye, can they flush it and then have a chance? If they get a win, they got a chance to get to double-digit victories again this season, which would be huge for this program and obviously their head coach and everything they have built. So I'll be curious to see how this one shakes out on Saturday.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. Illinois may not be getting back to the playoff, and they were obviously preseason one of the playoff dark horses or sleepers, if you will. That was kind of the goal at the beginning of the year after getting double-digit wins last year. But if they win out, and they are likely to be favored in the majority of the games the rest of the way, they will get to 10 wins. It will be the first time in program history, first time ever in Champaign, back-to-back 10-win seasons. That's what Brett Bielema is trying to build with the Illini. Meanwhile, not far from our studios here in Chicago, just down the street at Wrigley Field, we'll have Michigan and Northwestern. Wildcats have been so close. They need one more to get to that all-important 6. Meanwhile, Yogi, Michigan in that spot where you're coming off a bye, looking to finish really strong and trying not to look past the next 2 games where you will be favorites before, of course, the game looming on the Saturday after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, this is a huge game. This is a huge game for both programs. I cannot wait to watch the defense of Tim McGargle and Northwestern against this offense of Chip Lindsey and this freshman quarterback, Bryce Underwood. I really believe this. As freshmen or rookies in the NFL, you can hit a wall to a certain degree, and you got to be able to take a breath and reset. Bye week, I think, does that for Bryce Underwood. Just be able to just take a beat. I hope he got away from the facility because all we hear about is how he lives in that facility. And just reset, whether it's your mind, your body, your soul, all of those things I think are so vitally important, especially when you're playing at a place like Michigan. So now you come to this environment. It's a different place to play. I've played in baseball stadiums. You've been at these games at Wrigley. It's a little funky. It is different. You got to get used to that. And I'll be curious to see if Michigan can run the football. If they can, they'll be just fine. If they struggle running the football, look out for this Northwestern team. I mean, they've played everybody tough. They had all the opportunity a week ago against USC if things bounce a little bit different their way to get a huge upset. I wouldn't be shocked if this one comes down right to the end. So I think it comes down to, can Michigan do what they've done there? Just keep running, trust it. Can you break one? And all of a sudden you got an explosive run and you win 21-17. If you don't have those explosive runs, if this Northwestern defense can keep everything caged in, look out. Like, I think we got a whale of a game. And for Northwestern to have this one in their backyard in Wrigley in the final year before they open up that marvelous new stadium, I think it's going to be electric. And I expect this one to come right down to the end.
Yeah, I think it comes down to that run game. I know Michigan relies so much on that run game. Of course, no Justice Haynes again. Jordan Marshall has been terrific. How much did they use Bryce Underwood in the run game this weekend? It's something we've seen from time to time with Michigan. I wouldn't be surprised, to your point, Yogi, if they try to keep that Northwestern defense on its heels by utilizing Bryce Underwood a little bit more with QB-designed runs. Now, big early season win for the UCLA women. Number 3 Bruins knocked off number 6 Oklahoma 73-59 Monday night. Jonna Neepkins had 20 points. Angela Dugalich off the bench with 16 and 15. Something of an off night for Lauren Betts, not for most people. She had 10 rebounds, 9 points, 4 blocks, but she is a preseason All-American. Here's Corey Close on the Utah transfer Neepkins.
Well, she's known as like the 50-40-90 shooter, right? And I thought she was a playmaker today. And we'd seen it, and she's done an excellent job. And I thought her ability to read and make decisions off the pick and roll, off of people flying out and attacking the closeout, I thought she did an excellent job. But I thought the other person that really turned the game was Angela Dugalich. What she did from her three-point shooting to her defense, we didn't have a matchup for 6. And for her to come in, and she just absolutely turned the game where we were struggling and on the defensive end, and then really helped us on the offensive end and rebounding as well.
So UCLA is number 3. See, USC now up to number 8. It's been a great start for the all-everything freshman Jazzy Davidson and the Trojans. Maryland, Michigan giving the Big Ten 4 teams inside the top 15. Iowa, Michigan State, and Washington also inside the top 25. OSU, Minnesota, and Nebraska receiving some votes as well. To the men's game, where Tyler Bilodeau scored 21 points as UCLA takes care of West Georgia 83-62. This without the services of Donovan Dent. It was a precautionary measure as the guard is dealing with a muscle strain. Trent Perry had 17, 9, and 5. Eric Daly chipped in with 14. How about Northwestern? Wildcats going over the century mark for the first time in 5 seasons. Shot 60% from the floor, 11 different players scoring, led by Nick Martinelli, who had 21. Max Green had 16, all in the first 6 minutes of the game. Justin Mullins, 16. Trey Singleton, 15 for the Wildcats as well. Dennis Battleau scored all 19 of his in the first half for Rutgers as the Scarlet Knights knocked off Maine 72-60 on Monday night. Dylan Grant, welcome to the party. First career double-double with 10 points and 10 rebounds. Rutgers opened the game on a 15-2 run. Battleau scored 19 of Rutgers' first 37 points. He was 4 of 5 from three-point range before the break. Check out the men's AP poll. Purdue receiving 36 first-place votes. That's the most in the country, but the total puts the Boilermakers just behind number 1 Houston. Michigan up to number 6. Illinois at 14. UCLA, Michigan State, Wisconsin, all inside the top 25. Coming up tonight, don't miss a hoops doubleheader here on the Big Ten Network as Penn State takes on Navy, followed by Wisconsin against Ball State. Our coverage begins at 6:30 Eastern, 3:30 Pacific, only on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. Take a look at your big stat presented by Gatorade. Heisman hopefuls that call Columbus and Bloomington home. Just silly numbers for both Julian Sayin and Fernando Mendoza. You see Sayin nearing 81% completion rate. Their touchdown to interception ratios, both right about 6-1. No question, these guys are both at or near the top of every Heisman conversation right now. Rick Pizzo back with Yogi Roth, and full disclosure, we are Heisman voters, so we get to decide on who takes home that stiff arm statuette at the end of the year. My, I think, minority opinion right now, Yogi, is that Sayin has a very slight lead over Fernando Mendoza, a couple other quarterbacks, Marcel Reed from A&M, Ty Simpson from Alabama in that mix, and of course, I would throw Jeremiah Smith in there as well.
Yeah, I mean, Jeremiah Smith might be the most dominant player in America, and I know this has become a pseudo-quarterback award, but you can't argue that. I go back to my college roommate was Larry Fitz, and he didn't win it. He took second, and I was like, was there a more dominant player in America that year? I could argue that as well with Jeremiah Smith. And what I know you'll do, and I hope I'll do, and the rest of the voters, let's just hold our water a little bit. Let's not commit to anybody. Let's let these games play out, because what if we get a Big Ten championship game between Indiana and Ohio State? This will be amazing, because maybe Jeremiah Smith goes off. Maybe one of these quarterbacks do. Who knows how it shakes out? But a lot, of course, will be at stake, let alone a presumptuous #1 seed in the CFP. But I want to start with Fernando Mendoza. I believe, and every quarterback has to have this, you got to have an it factor, which means you walk into a room, people feel your presence, and you make them better. He has done that time and time again, every locker room he's walked into. But most importantly, when the game has been on the line, he has met the moment. We talk about Heisman moments all the time. It's not just in the final game of the regular season or a conference playoff game. These are big moments where he's had to do it in Eugene, and when they went to Kinnick, and then, of course, in Happy Valley. So to me, those are the things that have really stood out, of throwing a pick, throwing a bad pick, being tied, being down in the fourth quarter, and then he rips that slant to Elijah Surratt, no problem. He throws a bad pick against the Ducks, no problem. Drives him right down the field, back shoulder throw, and then we know the drive we showed off the top of the show, and then this throw. To have the courage and the willingness and the confidence and the it factor to let it rip in those moments, to me, is Heisman worthy. And I don't believe in just singular moments. Like, I think you got to stack it. And I go through my cadence of evaluating for this award. We went through it last week. It's a 10-point scale, Rick. Part of that is meeting it in these big stages. And Fernando's just had more of them. Maybe it's because his team has been down or tied. Like, we can argue that of how talented each team is in their respective games based on their schedule. But Fernando, when he's had to show up, he has not flinched.
Yeah, but I would throw this out there, and I understand your point, but the it factor is not part of what the Heisman's mission and the message that they send out about who you should vote for and why you should vote for them, right? It's the most outstanding player in college football that represents themselves the best on the field. I totally understand what you're getting at, but I actually think that may be an unfair judge of Julian Sayin, because he is a quieter quarterback. He is not an outward verbal leader. He's not going to be the guy that shows you a ton of emotion. He is not, Fernando Mendoza, I love him in the post-game interviews. He's like he's a professional broadcaster. He addresses his one shot, right? He looks directly into the camera. And so you feel like he is in your living room. I don't think that's ever going to be Julian Sayin, but Yogi, that shouldn't take away from the efficiency. He is at 81%, and if you look at the numbers even deeper, on his deep balls, the accuracy that he throws his deep balls with, I believe beyond 20 yards, he has 14 touchdowns. These are throws that go beyond 20 yards. 14 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. I know you have Tate, I know you have Smith, but that tells me a lot about asking a young quarterback to do everything, and he has checked every single box.
Yeah, make no mistake about it. The it factor is not about how loud you yell or how well you interview. The it factor is how you influence the people around you.
Fair.
And there's a variety of different styles within that, man. I actually detest arguments of we need an alpha who's super loud as a quarterback and a guy who's going to rip his shirt off and flex to the crowd. I think that is for showmanship. I think that is based on someone's personality. I don't think that has anything to do with this award. I think this award is about your performance. And every quarterback I've been around that is elite has an it factor, and the presence is felt, and it does elevate people. The way you do it is based on your style. Fernando Mendoza might do it in a different way in terms of how he communicates. Julian Sayin might pull his left tackle over and just whisper to him. He might pull his wideout over and just whisper to him. He might talk to the defensive lineman and say, hey, man, I need you in this game. Hey, I need a great Tuesday practice. And he has that too. And I think that's what's amazing about the evaluation, because it's not a popularity contest. It's how you perform. And I think Julian Sayin is square in the mix. I would not give it to any of these three players that we're talking about today. I think they all three have met the moment and have proven to be that individual for their team in this team sport. So I don't think we lean either way. I think both players have accentuated their tremendous skill sets, and that's what we've seen, and we'll see how it plays out in November.
I'd love to see that Big Ten championship game matchup. PSA to other voters out there. Some do send their ballots in before the championship games. Wait. You have another week. Wait until you see the final games of the regular season and the championship games in all these conferences as well. Wednesday, it's the 25 Big Ten men's soccer tournament semifinals as Washington battles Michigan, followed by Maryland, UCLA. Live coverage at 4 Eastern, 1 Pacific on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app. Women's soccer has reached the NCAA tournament stage with the 9 teams from the Big Ten you see on your screen inside the tournament field. First round games coming your way this Friday and Saturday. Under a minute to go, Yogi Roth, tales from snowy Madison this past weekend.
It's been a while since I've used an ice scraper, but I'll say this. It was an amazing opportunity to sit down with Mason Posa, Mason Rigo, Rico Hallman. They talked about Luke Fickell, and they talked about this program, and you saw the hope in their eye never wane. And then to watch them do that as the snow is falling and then the crowd is rushing, it was just an epic moment. And then to watch the snow build from my hotel room as the game ended, and land back here in sunny California. It was a perfect weekend.
Last time I was in Madison and it snowed like that, Melvin Gordon ran for an FBS record 4:08. Of course, it was broken the very next week by Samaj Pirine. Snow hadn't even melted in Madison by the time Samaj broke Melvin's record. For Yogi Roth, I'm Rick Pizzo. Appreciate your time as always. Jerry DiNardo joins me Wednesday. We'll see you then.